Commission meeting. We will begin the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. And Commissioner Velto, will you please lead us?
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Michelle, can we please have roll call?
Hang on just a second, sorry. Okay. Alex Velto,
Here.
JD Draculich,
Here.
Peter Gower,
Here.
Mark Johnson,
Here.
Arthur Munoz is absent? No? Is he
Here.
Oh, there he is, okay. Sylvia Villanueva,
Here.
Kathleen Taylor,
Here.
we have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Before we move on to item number 3, public comment, I just would like to let everybody know that item 6.1 under public hearings has been pulled from the agenda tonight. So we'll move on to item number 3, public comment. Michelle, do we have any public comment?
Okay, before I start the public comment, I just need to read this into the record. It should be noted for those in the audience that comments are to be addressed to the Planning Commission as a whole. Comments heard under this item will be limited to 3 minutes per person and may pertain to matters both on and off the Planning Commission agenda. Please note that the Planning Commission may not take action upon any matter not agendized for possible action on today's agenda. When you are called on for public comment, please state your name for the record and begin speaking. The timer will begin when you say your name and you will be afforded 3 minutes. Lastly, while in this room, please be respectful. Warnings will be issued by the presiding officer if there is disruptive behavior. You will be asked to leave the chambers if the behavior continues. So with that, we did receive some public comment related to future agenda items and also a homeless camp. Those were forwarded to the Planning Commission and they have been entered into the record. I did not receive any voicemails and I did not receive any request to speak forms for this item.
Okay, thank you. We'll close public comment and open item number 4, approval of the minutes from the January 5th Planning Commission meeting.
Commissioner Munoz, I'll approve the minutes. Make a motion.
Commissioner Velto, I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, motion carries. Moving on to item number 5, this is a presentation and discussion by John Flansburgh, City of Reno Director of Public Works on the Reno Stead Water Reclamation Facility expansion and items related to the sewer in North Valleys. Thanks for being here, John.
All right, good evening, everyone. Go ahead and share my screen. All right, is that showing up for everyone? Great. Just wanted to give an update on general sewer capacity. I'll talk about North Valleys, but I thought it'd be helpful if I just kind of went through a little bit of the sewer utility in general and the items that we cover and some of the capital project planning as we how we plan for sewer and for growth in the region. So just a reminder, this map here is just kind of showing the sewer sheds. So the gray in the very south part of the map is everything within the city of Reno that flows to the South Truckee Meadows plant. The pink and purple, Lawton Verdi purple and the pink area for the main Truckee Meadows sewer shed all flows to the Truckee Meadows plant. The blue on the top is to the Reno Stead facility. The red area is what flows to Washoe County's Lemon Valley plant. And what's not shown but would be up to the left of the blue is what would be to the Washoe County's Cold Springs plant. Our largest facility is the Truckee Meadows Water Reclamation Facility. This is where predominantly the majority of our sewage goes for the region. Basically, it's water in, water out, and quite the intricate processes here to clean up the water so that we can return it back to the river. As far as capacity here, just to make you aware, we currently are flowing about 29 million gallons a day. We certainly have capacity up to 34 with what's existing, and there's projects that we can do to expand that. There's a lot of talk. Our permitted capacity is up at around is over 40 million gallons a day. The thing that you have to remember in regards to capacity is that we've been putting in these low flow fixtures and all these things to reduce the amount of water that comes in. When it was originally planned, it was at the strength or concentration that we were experiencing at that point. So there's additional things we have to do now because the concentrations coming in are higher than that. And so we just monitor those and have basically capital projects that allow us to grow the plant. We show here the amount that's Reno allocated capacity. In the yellow gold color, the blue shows the unallocated capacity still remaining for Reno. Green is Sparks allocated capacity, and the sliver of purple is what they have remaining, the unallocated capacity. Again, as we grow, as we make some of these improvements at the plant in the future, we'll be able to expand that capacity from where we are today. And just to give you an idea, we're at 29 million gallons a day now. We're only increasing flow at the plant somewhere in the neighborhood between 350 and 450,000 gallons a year. And so we're anticipating about 31 million gallons a day in about 5 years time frame. So you can see how the growth is affecting our Tumworth plant. Obviously, with the plant, and when we look at growth, we're also looking at our capacity in our collection system. We have over 800 miles of sewer. We have about 70 miles modeled. We model primarily the larger diameter pipe, our trunk, and our interceptor lines. We have begun to go to smaller lines, especially in our critical area, and I'll talk about that in the next slide. We do about $18 million annually on rehabilitation projects. That is just repairing or improving the system that we currently have for the users that are out there today. One of those items that just obviously we're looking at as new development comes in, as we build denser developments, that often can cause us to need to upsize our collection system pipes. And so we're always looking at that when new development comes in, or especially when we have pockets of more dense development coming in certain areas, to make sure that we have the capacity needed. As I mentioned, as we look further out, we just actually are wrapping up a project on sewer capacity in a collection system within the McCarran Loop. And again, talking about those areas that we expect will have some more higher densities. As those come in, we just want to make sure that we've got those projects identified, and so we stay on top of those before the actual development occurs, so we can make those changes. Tonight, I want to talk about North Valley's, where we stand today on the sewer and effluent management projects. As many of you are aware, we are actually about 80% complete on the expansion at Risworth, expanding from 2 million gallons to 4 million gallons. That will allow us to have the treatment capacity there, but with that treatment capacity, that isn't all that we need. We also need to have the effluent management side. What do we do with all the effluent that's there? We only have a certain amount that we can discharge to Swan Lake. We, of course, have several users that use the effluent, but we don't have a storage. We don't have any storage in Reno Sparks or Reno Stead area. So we have to just use what we treat at the moment. And so it does limit us on how much we can do during the year, because we don't have that long-term storage or wintertime storage that we can move water towards. Currently at Risworth, we're down to only about 162 units remaining on what council has approved. Now, I want to put an asterisk next to that, because the flow shade that we have available remaining is actually over 2,000 residential units, but we would need council approval to open up some additional capacity, and all that's will not become available until we won't have the full 4 million gallons available until after we complete some of the effluent management projects that we're working on. But we're basically, for what we're seeing coming in to the plant. You know, we are getting very close to the end of that. So we'll be going to council asking for additional capacity in relation to also looking at our sewer connection fees. As many of you know, we have entered into an interlocal agreement between Truckee Meadows Water Authority and the city of Reno to create a full field scale project for creating A+ effluent, which basically is drinking water quality. Doing that process, piping the water up to American Flat and injecting it into the ground and then pulling it back out with the plan to use that for future potable water. Here's just a quick sketch of the kind of giving you an idea location wise. The 1, 2, 3 in the bottom of the center of the screen is where the existing reclamation facility is, where we would see building an advanced purified water facility to get that final polishing to get it to drinking water standards, and then the pump station to actually pump it up above the airport to the American Flat site. I like to throw in this slide just because I think it uniquely shows where the American Flat is, where you can see the pivots that we used when we pumped out Swan Lake and pumped the water up to American Flat and used it for irrigation purposes. That was a successful project in order to pump down Lemon Valley. We have that in place that we can use that as it is needed as well. The project for us to make the A+ water actually would pump it up and put it in the aquifer below the American Flat site. In order to prove that up over time with the regulators, we would be pulling it back out of the ground and using it for irrigation purposes there. Or if we had high water years and we needed to manage the lake level at Swan Lake, we'd be able to pump water from there directly and just leave the A+ water in the aquifer. Again, American Flat Farm's been important to us for that ability for lake management to keep the water elevation in Swan Lake at a reasonable level. And then also, as I mentioned, approving up future for those, for our regulators on the advanced purified water quality. The benefits of advanced purified water, again, is as an effluent management solution, is it takes flow out of Swan Lake. It's something we can do year round. It allows us to utilize the full expansion of the wastewater treatment plant. It creates this renewable water resource and will generate up to $80 million in future water rights, which is part of the agreement we have with Tumwa. It gives us that resilient water source and it's drought proof. We will always have this available to us, and it's a great alternative from using Truckee River water up in the North Valleys. And then finally, just to round this out, you know, I've talked about some of the capital improvement projects and items that we have together as we are looking towards a sewer connection fee update, which we're in the process right now of completing. We look at all of the capital improvement programs at the wastewater treatment plants. We look at the sewer collection system if we need to upsize pumps at lift stations or the pipe sizing. We also look at the effluent management and what needs to happen there in our reuse system. All of those go into the overall cost. We divide that by the available capacity at the locations at the 2 wastewater treatment plants, so that we'll gain at those plants. And then that comes up with the connection fee. And then with that information, as we finalize that in the very near future, we'll be holding a workshop with the development community to talk about sewer connection fees, what that looks like. It's going to need to be for us to be able to grow, and we'll just have discussions on their thoughts with that, and then bring that forth to council in the future. And with that, that concludes my presentation for tonight.
Thank you so much. Commissioners, do you have questions? I'll give it a second because I can't see for the screen to go back.
Very good.
Anyone in Commissioner Draculich or Commissioner Velto, do you guys have any questions for John?
No, just thank you for the presentation. It was very, very helpful.
Commissioner Villanueva, do you have a comment question?
Question. Thank you, Madam Chair. Is there any way I can get a copy of that presentation? Can you?
Yes.
Give that?
Yep. Michelle has a copy of the presentation, and I'm sure she could send that out to all of the commissioners.
Great. Thank you.
Commissioners, other questions? I don't see any. I have a quick question, John. So I want to, we get developments in here, and some of our findings are resources, regional resources, and to make our findings, we have to make sure we have I guess, an obligation to make sure that the resource is there for future development. And I want to say maybe a couple of years ago, there was a really fancy spreadsheet that you guys might have used that showed all the development projects, what the capacity was, what they might need, and where they might come in line. So I guess my question is, when we're looking at development and it's going through your team and the planners, you guys are making sure that there's capacity for the development project. And maybe it's not at the time that we're looking at the projects, but when they come to fruition or when they come to development, and if there isn't capacity, you guys are going to say no, or you got to do something to make sure there is. And I'm just wondering if you could maybe expand on that a little bit.
Certainly, thanks for the question. At the Reno Stead plant, because we were getting close to the end of capacity up there before the expansion, and obviously we still have some work to do, we have a sewer allocation program in place. And so when you talk about a fancy spreadsheet, we actually locate that on the website. And so individuals can go in and see where we stand on our existing capacity at the Reno Stead plant and what's been made available. And we show on that fancy spreadsheet the different projects that are currently in, say, for final map, as opposed to those that are kind of in the tentative map stage, and those that are just like planned unit developments, longer term. And so we are looking certainly in the Reno Stead. And then we also have the same type of setup for Tumwharf. We just don't post it on the website because it's not under the allocation program. We have good capacity at Tumwharf to make that happen. But you're absolutely correct. We will be looking over when they come in to get their final map. And I have several discussions with developers along the way when they have questions about their needs for sewer capacity. And sometimes it's not just the capacity, sometimes it's the strength of the sewer that they're going to be putting in, say, an industrial event that we have to look at and see if there's some sort of pre-treatment needed. But all that occurs through with the staff members here before we do that.
Thank you very much. And almost any spreadsheet is fancy to me. So commissioners, other questions?
Madam Chair, I have a quick question for John. John, is there a similar plan at Tumwharf to do, you mentioned the type of upgrades and listed out the cost that's going on at the Reno Stead facility?
Yes, we have several capital projects listed for Tumwharf. It'll be included in as we look at the connection fee needed for Tumwharf. We add what projects need to be added onto here to get us, say, from 34 to 37 million gallons. And then we add that additional capacity, take all the projects needed, divided by that capacity, and that's what the connection fee needs to be going forward. One of the other things we have that I didn't really go into is the Tri-Center pipeline. And so they're nearing completion of that. The beauty of the Tri-Center pipeline is it's going to be up to 4,000 acre feet of water a year that we would be moving through the pipeline. There'll be replacement water in the river, so it takes care of our need there. The benefit to the plant is if we're not discharging the effluent to the river, then we don't have the associated nitrogen, phosphorus, total dissolved solids, those things that the regulators are looking at. We don't have to add that concentration to the river. So it's like getting an upgrade to the plant for that. And 4,000 acre feet is equivalent to 3.6 million gallons a day. And so it's a huge lift for us there as well. So there's just some good benefits that we have and how we manage the effluent. Again, it's an effluent management solution in the end.
Madam Chair, I do have a question. And how should is there a way that you'd like me to, is there like something here I can use to raise my hand? I'm not seeing it here, but.
You can just raise your hand. I can see that. Go ahead.
So this question's for John. The funding for those capital improvement projects, where is that derived from? And is there a fund that new developments contribute to assist with some of that?
Yes, so thank you for the question. So the user fees that come in, your quarterly bills that come into that you're assessed, that is for the operations and maintenance and replacement of the existing system. These projects that we use to actually add capacity to the plant, that's what gets calculated in those connection fees. And so we seek after growth paying for growth. And so when the developers come in and they're paying those connection fees, it is a result of their incremental amount for the improvements needed for whether it's upsizing a pipe in the collection system to get it to the plant, whether it's the pumps in a pump station that we need to increase the size because of greater volume coming to the plant, or it's actually at the actual wastewater treatment plant for some process inside the fence, we call it, that needs to happen to accommodate that growth. Those are the types of projects that go into calculating that connection fee, and it's all connection fee driven.
Okay, commissioners, any other questions?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Johnson, kind of tacking along a little bit with what Commissioner Villanueva was saying. John, in your presentation, it wasn't a fancy spreadsheet, but it was a fancy map that had everything kind of highlighted in terms of projects that are either slated but not started for construction, or some of them it looks like were highlighted that have just been submitted initially for even some tentative maps. In the analysis of that, we've heard in the past that there's challenges with infill development because of some of the utilities. So what I gathered from what you were saying is that often in the older areas where the infill comes in, there could be some capacity or sizing or difficult issues off-site of the proposed development. So in a situation like that, how does the city, is the city working with the developer and actually adding that as a city capital improvement in order to accommodate the development? Or is that typically something that falls on the developer to do, possibly with the elimination or in lieu of the sewer connection fees?
Thank you for the question. In the past, we have required the developers to make sure that they have capacity, that they won't impact capacity all the way to the interceptor. And that's just to make sure from wherever, because we don't know where they're going to actually be located and how that's going to flow in. The one project I mentioned about doing the analysis within the McCarran loop and just finishing that up, that's actually where we're going down another size or two into those trunk lines and verifying and where we may have pinch points for capacity there. And from that, we will develop projects. Those types of projects we're actually proposing to include in future city improvements. And we will put the growth component of those projects, because it may be a very old sewer line, 40, 50 years old. And so it wouldn't be right to charge the new growth for the entire line if we're going to replace it. But there's an incremental amount that we would charge because we're upsizing maybe from a 10-inch to a 12-inch or 12 to 15 or something like that. So we are looking at those and becoming more sophisticated and understanding where those are. And we need to do that because of some of these projects coming in that are greater density in areas, especially within our core.
Thanks. It was kind of what I was gathering from the way you were presenting it. And I think that's ideally what, the city should be looking ahead at trying to simplify and allow for some of that denser development as much as we can. So thank you. I appreciate the answer and appreciate the presentation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I would just add to that is that there may be short distances because of where the lot project is located that they may need to add some capacity to get to the nearest trunk line, but it's not going to be like in the past where we may have had 1,000 feet of line or something or 2,000 that they needed to do something with. So thank you.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
Thank you very much, John. Thanks for your time and thanks for the presentation.
All right. Have a great evening, everyone.
You too. Okay, we'll move on to item 6.2. This is a recommendation to City Council. It's resolution number 01-22, case number LDC 22-00018 Vine Employment Center. And that's a request for a master plan amendment and a zoning map amendment. Do we have a presentation?
We're bringing everybody over, so just give us a
Okay.
few minutes.
And Michelle, we're going to do two motions on this one, two separate motions.
Yes, I think Brooke will discuss that in his presentation, so yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, good evening, Brooke Oswald, the Associate Plan for the record. I have two proposed motions at the end of my presentation I can leave you with.
okay. Thanks, Brooklyn.
Garrett, are you ready?
Yeah, good evening. Hi, Michelle. Yeah, I'm ready. Didn't know if Brooke went first or you'd like me to go first.
You'll go first.
Okay. Let me share my screen. We good? Everyone can see my screen? Perfect. I'm seeing heads nod. Well, good evening. For the record, Garrett Gordon, tonight representing Panettone. Along with me are a number of folks here to answer any questions. We have Stacy Huggins from Wood Rogers. We have Gabe Whitler, our engineer from Odyssey Engineering. And we have Lindy Deller, development manager from Panettone. Tonight before you is the Purified Employment Center, a master plan amendment, and a zoning map amendment. Panettone, certainly familiar with the area. They've done a number of high quality employment centers in Northern Nevada. One example is the North Valley's Commerce Center, close to 4 million square feet, fully leased, 5 buildings. They move quickly once they break ground and are entitled and break ground. They broke ground in 2019, completed construction in 2021. And you can see fully leased and many tenants who have brought a number of jobs to our region. They've moved on from North Valley's Commerce Center and moving forward with tonight's project, the Peavine Employment Center. The project area consists of 13 parcels, approximately 210 acres, located 250 feet south of the US 395 Red Rock interchange. You can see from the graphic below the map, it's a half-mile northwest of the developing logistics center corridor. In fact, it's only separated by 4 undeveloped parcels and a water tank. So we believe it's just a natural extension of the industrial logistics corridor that's run south of 395 and north of the existing Union Pacific Railroad up to this project area. And in fact, the staff report agrees with us that the staff is recommending not only approval of the project, but that the master plan be amended to expand the industrial logistical employment area, since the project leverages, and this is a quote from the staff report, leverages the area's infrastructure, workforce, and assets to broaden the economic base through attraction of manufacturing and logistics operations. So that industrial area would be expanded up to the project. So as mentioned, 13 parcels. The first one is a 158 acre parcel. You can see here on the top graphic, very large parcel, 158 acres. And that parcel is actually currently in the city of Reno. But the remainder of the parcels, the 12 parcels shown here in green, are still in Washoe County. So this is really, putting the final piece of the puzzle together, if you will, to complete this infill of the area, to bring these parcels into the city of Reno, which are surrounded by existing city of Reno jurisdiction, city of Reno sphere of influence. There are some parcels here to the east that are not owned or controlled by us. They were asked if they wanted to be included in this application. They said no, they wanted to stay within the county. So we respected their wishes and are just moving forward with these 12 parcels, which are around 44 acres in total. The annexation, of course, is not before you tonight, because annexation requests just go straight to city council. So once you make a recommendation tonight on the zone change and master plan designation, that will be bundled with the annexation and go up to city council for final decision. I can say, though, that staff is supporting the annexation request, given it's contiguous to the city of Reno and surrounded by sphere of influence. There is also a positive fiscal analysis. Washoe County has already taken actions to support this application. We've received unanimous approval to abandon certain right-of-ways within this green area to help and accommodate consolidating a number of these parcels. So we have a nice contiguous project assemblage to move the project forward. Regional planning. So what tier does this fall into? We are within tier 2 of the new regional land designation. As quoted from the staff report, that means we are a high density residential, commercial, and industrial node, or plan for those type of nodes, because there is public facility and service provisions that are currently in place or planned. So you can see on the top graphic here, we have tier 1, just to the southeast of us, and then the whole property is clearly within tier 2, which again encourages and requires this higher density nodes, including industrial. And not only, you have to take my word for it, but we did in fact reach out to regional just to make sure they didn't have any concerns with this annexation master plan zoning request. And as part of the tonight's staff report, you'll see a memo was attached from regional that says the regional planning agency has not identified any potential conformance issues at this time. I also included a third graphic. There were some questions of, well, does this actually make sense to be residential versus industrial? We say no for the reasons I gave in my previous slide, as well as the staff report. This is a natural growth or expansion of the industrial area. But you can see in this third graphic, the regional planning did an analysis of, hey, where do they predict future residential up to 2040? And this project is not included, or this area. Clearly, it's ready to move forward in industrial uses, not residential, probably given the proximity to US 395, proximity to the railroad, and again, this less than a half mile away from the industrial corridor. Why was this placed in tier 2? Well, first of all, for an infrastructure and this access plan from Red Rock Road via 395, and also direct access off of North Virginia, sets it up nicely for development, makes it very ideal for future development. It also improves access to parcels already in the city of Reno. As mentioned, that very large parcel to the south, that's part of the project, this will in fact improve access to it with the project. Infrastructure, again, we're also in tier 2 and ready to move forward because water is available via North Virginia Street to the north, as is sewer via the Silver Lake Red Rock intersection. So assuming the annexation gets approved, and that's kind of what you're basing your decision on tonight, assuming it gets approved, what would these properties come in at as far as master plan designations and zoning? Master plan, it would come in at large lot neighborhood and public, quasi-public, the roadways. And then the zoning would be large lot residential, the 2.5 acre per dwelling unit designation, as well as public facilities, again, for the roadways. This, of course, is very rural in nature, limits development to residential uses, which, as mentioned earlier, is really not supported by regional planning or City of Reno master plan policies. It specifically says, for example, again, from the staff report, tier 2 is high density residential, commercial, and industrial nodes, which we're proposing. This would be an expansion of the industrial node. So the application before you tonight is to propose or move forward or convert the master plan to mixed employment, along with parks, greenways, and open space. So you can see the map here. Approximately 170 acres would be mixed employment, the buildable areas, and then over 40 acres would be master planned open space. And those areas are shown here in green, which include a drainage way here, located here on the eastern portion of the property, a drainage way down the middle of the property. And then we wanted to make sure we provided, and not only said we would, but actually rezoned it and master planned it, a green space, open space buffer along the edge here to the west, the buffer, the existing residential properties, as well as the open space, green space designation along this area. Again, is a good buffer for some commercial uses. There's a private zoo and other kind of commercial residential uses. It does provide a nice buffer. Direct access to major roadway network, you can see, as well as this hatched area, which I'll get into in the next slide. That's the gateway. That's the entrance point into the project. And we've really limited the uses there, given some feedback we heard from the community. So that was the master plan, the zoning. So we worked extensively with staff to figure out what was the right zoning. And as you heard me say earlier, this should be a natural expansion of the industrial corridor. So first we looked at, should we rezone it industrial and industrial commercial? But we thought that might be a little intense given the compatibility with the surrounding land uses. So we went ahead and rezoned it to a specific plan district or a handbook. A handbook was drafted. I got to say, Stacy Huggins did a very nice job from Wood Rogers putting the handbook together. It's attached to the staff report, and that establishes stricter standards than industrial or industrial commercial, and really establishes a framework for future development. The goal here is to have a typical high quality employment center from Panettone. We can add some additional benefits in a handbook over a base zoning district and really custom tailor design standards and specific uses. So what's in the handbook? It was attached to the staff report. You can see limited land uses. On page 9 of the handbook, there's a list of land uses, very carved down as far as what can be operated here. Your typical manufacturing, outdoor storage, distribution center, industrial. Really, we envision a warehouse industrial logistics center. As far as the gateway area here off of Red Rock, we've heard from residents, I think all of you have for years, that there is a need for more restaurants out there, more retail, more commercial. So we've limited the manufacturing, the outdoor storage, kind of industrial uses on this gateway area. It's approximately 57,000 square feet, and really encourage and require commercial, and again, hopefully a restaurant can move forward in that area. There's also enhanced buffering provisions. We are increasing the maximum building area in mixed employment. That would be capped at 500,000. In industrial zoning, there would be no limit. So we pick somewhere in the middle and are capping the maximum building area to 2 million square feet of building. I mentioned the specific requirements for the gateway development, sustainability requirement, I'll get to on the next slide. And you can see on this map, we are maintaining not only the connectivity of the trail system through, and shown here in blue, through the open space areas, but as well as connectivity with the new roadway system and the sidewalk system. We'll make sure we're not only preserving, but enhancing the north-south connectivity for the project and the area. So in our PVOD Employment Center handbook, shown here on this slide, and again, attached to the staff report, there is a sustainability section. I think this body and this planning commission has heard in the past sustainability policies, and eventually a policy that would be enacted by the city council and incorporated into code. This is what we're proposing as our own sustainability policies, which are completely voluntary, right? This is not required, but Panettone is always trying to do LEED buildings and focus on sustainability. So this is completely voluntary. You can see here that on page 11 of the handbook, we've came up with some sustainability requirements that for buildings over 100,000 square feet, 6 of these elements would have to be complied with. Well, I have to say we've worked with Commissioner Johnson, and we reached out to him, given his architectural background and position on this commission, and said, gave him a preview of the project, and he said, you know what, I'd like to encourage you guys to go a little further. I'd like to figure out how you can quantify this a little bit better so the city of Reno and your tenant or the master developer can really see how you're meeting these standards. So you can see this red line, and I'm sure Commissioner Johnson may want to comment. The feedback we got from Commissioner Johnson was all of these changes. And I know I'm running out of time here, but I'm happy to go through them in more specificity later when we hit the questions. But it is a lot better, I'll have to say, than what we started with. There's measurable metrics, it's quantifiable, and again, the city, a tenant, and the master developer, if they choose any of these criteria, it'll be easy to figure out, did we comply or not? So I want to thank Commissioner Johnson for his input. Also input from the public. We held 2 neighborhood meetings. One was held in December 13th. 100 note cards went out. We got 2 people to participate. Ward 4 NAB, we also did a presentation there. And what we got out of those presentations were some feedback, and we did in fact amend the handbook in order to respond to those comments. One, you heard about the limited allowed uses in the gateway area and to encourage restaurants and retail uses. 2, you can see here in blue, there would be a pad along Trail Drive. We've agreed to put up a 6-foot screen wall with landscaping in front of the wall in order to provide a nice buffer for existing residential and commercial uses. Here in red is a sign that will be installed to prohibit any truck traffic that would be traversing eastbound and heading down trail into the neighborhood here. They could not go past this red dot. They'd have to turn into the pad B or prior to when getting there. 3, enhanced lighting standards for dark sky we're complying with. And also we have worked with I know we're not talking about a project tonight, but we have worked with RTC, NDOT, City of Reno for when we do bring forward a project and what that looks like, what the traffic mitigations will be. We will be required to do an intersection control evaluation analysis to make sure we conform and understand what those mitigation measures might be. Master plan policies, 100% support this project. Employment areas desired by existing businesses, check. Continued growth of logistics and manufacturing, check. Establishment of new businesses, check. Adequate public facilities and infrastructure, check. And this one at the bottom, I think, is right on. Voluntary consolidation and assemblage of properties to improve and coordinate the redevelopment of blocks or segments rather than a property by property approach. We have an assemblage. We're moving forward with a high quality employment center and it meets that policy right on. What's next? Tonight's not the project, but we will be bringing forward a major site plan review for drainage and for grading. And that does require planning commission review and approval. So we'll be back before you with project details. So in summary, staff says this supports the growth of the corridor. Public services are adequate. The project would not be a fiscal burden to the city. It's actually a positive net gain for the city. And staff is recommending approval. And we would respectfully ask that you uphold staff's recommendation. And I appreciate your time tonight. Our whole team is here for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. Good on timing there. Brooklyn, do you have a presentation?
Good evening, Planning Commission. Brooke Oswald, Associate Planner for the record. I do have a quick presentation. I'll try to not rehash much of the information that was given by the applicant's representative. I think they did a thorough job of explaining the project itself. I'm going to go a little bit more into a process and some of these things and what is a special plan district and annexation, and go into that a little bit more so we have an understanding of that background. So just quickly, the project information to about 210 acres, 13 parcels. As was stated, they have assembled these parcels to come in with a fairly large assemblage of parcels for this proposal. The request is for a master plan and zoning map amendment, and then we have that associated request for an annexation. Just to give some context of the site, this is the intersection of Red Rock and 395, where we're seeing our off-ramps and exits there. This is Stead Boulevard to the east. And the railway is directly south of the parcel. We do have 2 other employment hubs that we're seeing in the general area. The one on the left up towards Silver Lake Open Space, that is a planned unit development. This body has had several opportunities to work with that particular zoning. And the SPD we see tonight is similar in some ways, but is different. And then down on the right side, we're seeing additional industrial coming in off that logistics corridor. Many of you will know this is the site of Copart that was before us at one period of time, just to give a little context and surrounding site. We have some federal lands that start to limit that development and growth out in this area that we're seeing, both to the south and to the north. We have some existing neighborhoods. There are some smaller lot detached neighborhoods. We're seeing some multifamily. Those are directly north across 395. Then coming a little bit closer to the subject site. Once again, that red rock and 395 for context. We're seeing that county land that is there that is not annexed. Largely what we see there are large lot, single family detached. And we do have a zoo adjacent to the request. This is where we're seeing the annexation coming into that portion, just so we have a clear idea of that portion of that. So I quickly want to go over the annexation because it's something we don't see often, and how these are processed, and by state law and by our Reno Municipal Code, what is required for those. Once again, you can see our location here is roughly in this area right here where the annexation is to occur. The purple that's before you now, that is the sphere of influence. As you can see, there is an island within that sphere of these parcels that is not under the jurisdictional control of the city of Reno, but by NRS, specifically 278-670, allows landowners, if they have the assemblage, and 100% of the landowners can apply for annexation, but they need to be contiguous to the surrounding city limits. So as you can see, as the yellow comes in, that's the city of Reno limits around that, and they are adjacent both to the north and to the south on this particular parcel. Just want to reiterate once again, the Planning Commission tonight is not making a decision on the annexation. You want to, those findings that are limited strictly to the master plan and the zoning map amendment on this. Quickly go over the development context of the area. If we look, this is Lemon Drive. We have Stead Boulevard and Red Rock. This aerial before you right now is approximately about a decade ago, about 2012. As you can see, the largely vacant land to the south of 395. This is our project site here just off of Red Rock. This is coming in about 2016. What we're starting to see now is some of that development down around Lemon Drive. We are seeing some other manufacturing and industrial development out towards the Reno Stead Airport. And this is 2022. So we've seen an incredible amount of development, and a lot of this development has really happened within the last 3 to 4 years in this area, where that corridor has, and many of these applications have been before this commission. Additionally, we're seeing supportive housing across 395 coming in, as we're seeing additional residential units being built. Additionally, it should be mentioned that the Reno Transportation Commission, so they have their long-range plans. As we've gone through a lot of these entitlements on the corridor of North Virginia, we've talked about that transportation, and that RTC is currently designing and will expand the capacity from Lemon Drive to Stead Boulevard. In that Reno Transportation 2030 to 2050, and speaking with our public works, we would see probably more that 2030 to 2040. There are designs and capacity improvements that will happen down North Virginia from Stead Boulevard to Red Rock. Reimagine Reno Master Plan, that's the big plan of who we want to be and where we're going. I think this will quickly illustrate what is changing and what's going forward. So that LL, the big yellow, is our project site that represents large lot residential. We have some SPA surrounding that special planning area. A lot of that's left over from the Reno Stead Joint Corridor Plan. To the yellow that we're seeing across 395 is largely residential. As we move in, we're seeing that mixed employment coming in, and that preservation around the outside of parks, greenways, and open space. As we look at the large lot and the zoning code update on that. Our site is currently zoned large lot residential, 2.5 units per, or excuse me, 2.5 acres are required per dwelling unit on this. And the change will be to SPD. So let's talk about a specific plan district really quickly, because this is something many of us haven't seen before us. This came back with, we had sort of lost this tool for a period of time, and it was deemed to be a legitimate, legal, and useful tool in many areas to plan specifically larger areas or more challenging areas. A specific plan district is similar to a PUD, but the PUD is actually setting the zoning and is the zoning itself. A specific plan district has a zoning underneath that. And that zoning in this case is mixed employment. So all their basis is coming off that mixed employment. So as we look at intensity of uses in those mixed employment, we have industrial, commercial, and then industrial being our most intense. So this is one of the lower intensities of those industrial uses that we'd see. With that base zoning, what they have done is now proposed modifications through that handbook. And that handbook basically sets code above the existing code of mixed employment. They're providing that commercial node that was needed and those restrictions to that commercial node. We're seeing in that mixed employment, we have a restriction that restricts buildings from being over 500,000 square foot. They are asking that be released and they can move past that with their zoning. We're seeing enhanced buffers, screening, and landscape to help accommodate and to deal with those larger buildings. We're seeing those protections of the drainage way and pathway corridors and other vital elements out in that area. And then we're seeing those enhanced sustainability requirements. Staff has reviewed the recommendation by Commissioner Johnson and is in agreement with what is being proposed. Quickly go over our public input and neighborhood meeting was held. Concerns were largely about direct impacts to properties, many things that we see happening through further discretionary review of walls, buffering impacts. There was a NAB. Many of the questions there were, would I be required to annex? Do I have to annex? The answer is those surrounding county parcels that are not within the sphere of influence, they are not could not be forced to annex, but they can voluntarily annex if they are adjacent to city property. Additionally, there was many questions asked about the availability of utilities. As utilities are brought by the developer to service this site, would they have access or potential access to those in the future? So that'd be water, sewer, your telecom, and other services there could become available to those surrounding properties. We have received some public comments on this in opposition. Those are largely due compatibility, an opposition to industrial use versus more residential uses, impacts on the surrounding roadway network and character of the area. So with that, I'll leave you with two recommendations. Staff was able to make all the findings and does recommend approval of the request. So leave you with these two motions. One is based strictly on the master plan and the other is related to the zoning map amendment. With that, that concludes my presentation and I'm available for questions as necessary.
Okay, thank you, Brooke. Thanks, Michelle. Commissioners, let's have disclosures and we'll start with Commissioner Velto.
Commissioner Velto, familiar with the site. I spoke with the applicant's representatives and I reviewed emails. And I believe that is all. Thank you.
Commissioner Draculich?
Commissioner Draculich, same disclosures.
Commissioner Villanueva?
Good evening, Commissioner Villanueva. I am familiar with the site and I read emails.
Commissioner Munoz?
Same disclosures.
Commissioner Johnson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Johnson visited the site, received and read the emails, and as pointed out in the presentation, I spoke with the applicant's representative.
Commissioner Gower.
Commissioner Gower, I am familiar with the site, received and read emails, and spoke with the applicant's representative.
Commissioner Taylor, same disclosures. Michelle, do we have public comment for this item? I can see that there is a hand raised.
Yes, I believe we do. We have Rebecca Rhodes. Rebecca, can you hear us?
Rebecca, it looks like you're on mute. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Would you like to make public comment on this item?
Yes, I would, please.
Okay, you have 3 minutes to do so. The timer will start as soon as you speak. Please state your name for the record.
My name is Rebecca Rhodes.
Go ahead.
I am an affected entity, a concerned property owner. I am one of the residences right on the green beltway of this project zone. And I want it to be known that I wish to be involved at every step as this proceeds, because I know I cannot stop it alone. The project will move forward, I'm sure, but it will impact me greatly beyond anyone's current estimation. I've already met with Teresa Maloney, Stacy Huggins, Lindy Deller, and a few other people in a private meeting, but I want it to be known to the Planning Commission, please, that this project, the Peavine Employment Center, will totally change the affect of this community, the atmosphere, as well as the natural wild nature of the Peavine Mountain North Face Zone. I believe this area should be reviewed in terms of wildland and urban interface capability and transition areas. I don't think it has been. And I understand, well, I want everyone to understand its wildlife range area and the need for the preservation of that area. In addition to these things, the current state or atmosphere that we enjoy now, one of solitude, peace, and quiet. It's possible that this project is really a misfit in size for this area, but you have to come out and recognize what happens in this region, this zone of the North Face of Peavine Mountain. So should it go fully forward, my subsequent concerns include, but are not limited to, the quality of my well water, my property values being reduced potentially, the watershed mitigation plans due to the many acres of impervious surfaces, my view of Peavine Mountain and others in this residential area, the effect on my equestrian business, my barn. It's small, but I do have a beautiful property, and I have people who come and bring their horses and really can enjoy that. The dust, the noise, the light pollution, the traffic, the crime risk increase for my residential area. I don't have crime right now. And by bringing in this project, it's going to completely change that, I'm sure. My business interruption during the project build out is of great concern, and also how it operates going forward. So my access to the Peavine Mountain with my horses is of great concern to me, because that's why I bought this parcel. I love the mountain, and I love being able to access the mountain. So the landscaping will be of great interest.
Rebecca,
Yes?
I think we've come to the end of your.
Okay,
Thank you
good.
very much.
I had a couple questions for each of your presenters, but that is I think I got through the majority of my list.
Thank you very much. Michelle, do we have other public comment?
Yes, it looks like we have Jack Gall that wishes to make public comment. Jack?
Okay.
Jack, can you hear us? I believe are you on mute?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me, guys?
Yes, we can hear you. You have 3 minutes to make public comment, and I will start the timer. Please state your name for the record.
Perfect. Good evening. My name's Jack Gall. I recently moved to the area, partly to sort of get away from the hustle and bustle of Northwest Reno, to sort of go out a little bit more out into the countryside, to have a horse property for myself and my wife and our few dogs. A couple of sort of concerning points, sort of coming a lot, or from the perspective of the regional plan. So I know it was initially indicated that this region would not be considered for residential purposes, but sort of given the infill scenario or the other growth scenarios that are sort of part of the regional plan, that this development would sort of negate the ability to either use the smart greenfield or the infill scenario to sort of expand the residential use into that area. I know that the previous application by this owner was rejected because it did not meet the sort of regional plan's perspective on the area. And since it used like higher density residential, but if we're able to move towards sort of lower density residential in the region, I think that would be more beneficial, rather than just a bunch of warehouses to have boxes that go to California. My main opposition to this one, not only with sort of stymieing innovation, it would be I'd sort of request to sort of stick with the mixed employment zoning requirements of the sort of smaller building size. Seeing a 2 million square foot building outside of my window would not be very nice, and would definitely have a negative impact on the views from not only 395, but for the surrounding neighborhoods. Yeah, that's my main comments for this. The one other concern I would have would be sort of the 24-hour operations. I know that this is a quieter neighborhood, and when I do sort of visit friends to the north, driving by Petco at the middle of the night and hearing the trucks back up is not that nice. Yeah, I would rather not hear that at nighttime, trucks backing up. Are there restrictions on the usage of this area, or would it be allowed to be 24 hours a day?
So we're not going to be answering any questions during public comment. We can listen to you.
No worries. Cool.
We appreciate the question.
Okay. No worries. That's all the comments I have. I would just, it doesn't seem like it fits with the long-term plans for the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you, Mr. Gall. Michelle, do we have any other public comment? Is there anybody in person?
There are some people here, but they do not wish to speak. I did receive correspondence that was forwarded to the Planning Commission and has been entered into the record. I did not receive any voicemails on this item.
Okay, I don't see any other hands in the Zoom, so we will close public comment and bring it back to the commission for questions of the applicant or of Brooke. We'll start with Commissioner Velto or Commissioner Draculich, if you have any.
Not at the moment, Commissioner Draculich.
Not at the moment either. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, commissioners. How about commissioners on Zoom? Hands? Commissioner Villanueva?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I appreciate the applicant's perspective. Thank you for the presentation. It was very detailed. You hit on a lot of important points. I have some questions for the planner. Mr. Oswald. Okay, so Mr. Oswald, I just need some clarifying questions before I get into anything else. So is it correct that the current master plan designation is large lot neighborhood?
That is correct on a portion of the site. So the other portion that is not annexed has a master. I'm not as familiar with the county, so I've got to look it up really quick so I don't get confused on this. But it's the zoning on that is high density rural, and then the master plan is thought I had that right here. I'll look that up and I can have that for. It's master plan rural residential.
Okay, and then for the city of Reno, the part that is there a part that's not annexed, or is it, or that is not requesting annexation?
There are other portions that are not within the sphere of influence or not within the city of Reno.
Okay.
That are, and those are largely those large lot residential lots that I showed on the thing surrounding the parcel to the north and largely to the north and the west of the project site. And then we do see a commercial zoo located in that area also.
So I guess the more appropriate question would be, what would, if these parcels were annexed and all that they received approval for that, what would the zone defer to?
Sure. So per Reno Municipal Code, we have a translation table. And so that rural would come over to that large lot, similar to what we see. And then our zoning would come over to that large lot residential 2.5.
Okay. All right. And okay. And then currently there's no permitted right? Because it needs to go through the annexation process. That needs to be approved. And then if it was approved, we would go through and it would automatically be large lot or high density rural. And in a development like this would not have automatic rights because it doesn't fall into an industrial zone or currently an employment zone or anything like that. Is that correct?
The rights with the property currently would be under the county and their high density rural, and they would be under the city as that large lot residential 2.5. So they have entitled rights to them as that. With this request, it would move up to that mixed employment zoning, and the mixed employment zoning with the SPD on top of that, those additional handbook, that becomes the zoning that would be in place with this request.
Okay, but as is with the request, yeah. So if we were to approve it for ME, then the site could be developed as proposed by the applicant. But if it were not to be approved ME, this type of site, the proposed site would, the employment site, what I'm presuming is going to be some type of warehouse, that's not permitted to be developed as a matter of right.
Correct. But just for clarification, they are applying for a zoning of a specific plan district, not just ME. And the ME is the underlying under that SPD. Okay. The master plan, it gets confusing because we also have a master plan of mixed employment. So there's the master plan. Those need to be in conformance. So their zoning needs to be in conformance with their master plan. So they have chosen the zoning of an SPD, and an SPD is conforming under both the Parks, Greenways, and Open Space Master Plan and the Mixed Employment Master Plan.
Okay. But not under, and I'm sorry for all the questions. I just really want to make sure that I understand.
There's a lot of layers to this onion.
Okay, yes. So the SPD does not have an automatic right for use unless they get the annexation, unless we approve it for the SPD, right? This is something that cannot be built unless it goes through, right?
this body is not making an approval. So like I said, there's many steps to this. This is would be recommending to city council. There is a resolution that is passed by this body for the master plan that then would go to city council. At city council, they will hear per our code with an annexation. And if an applicant intends to modify the underlying zoning, they need to come forward with the master plan and zoning map amendment as to show that. And that provides that transparency to both the public of what we'd anticipate with this annexation, and then for the council to make a base decision on that annexation. So that annexation has a series of other findings that need to be held by council. So once council, if council does approve the annexation, the master plan, and the zoning map amendment, that master plan then needs to go to regional for conformance review on that. Additionally, if that does move forward, there is a project of regional significance associated with that, and that would be reviewed at that regional level, and they will look at that the tier levels of the regional. They're going to look at a number of other factors within that commission to determine if it's appropriate at a regional level for this to go through. Then if that happens, it would come back to city council for certification of the master plan at that point.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So there's several other public processes and public hearings that will happen before any rights are entitled to upzone this property.
Right. Okay. That's all my questions for right now, Madam Chair. Thank you. I do have comments, but I'll save those for the comment period. Thanks.
Okay. Rick, it sounds like you just described a complicated spreadsheet process.
Like I said, there are several layers to this, and there's several things that have to happen per state law, Reno Municipal Code, our regional, their review. So there's a lot going on with this particular request.
Okay, commissioners, Commissioner Gower.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the response to the previous question and understand the layers associated with this request and future processes involved. Brooke, having said that, would you agree that fundamentally the question that's being asked of this commission tonight and what you reviewed for staff is the question of, should this particular property be, the future of the property be changed from large lot residential, which I'm looking at the master plan, is intended to preclude premature development of rural land on the fringes of the urban area and protect environmental resources. We're being asked to change that to mixed employment, which is a higher intensity development. And we know through this SPD that it's going to entail some pretty, significant structures. So the fundamental question is, as a city, are we okay with that fundamental shift from a rural area to a pretty highly developed area?
Yep, fundamentally, that's what you're being asked to review and make a decision on tonight. That we have so many different policies in place, right? This is one where we're seeing utilities, we're seeing that proximity to 395. This is an area that we would anticipate, we see industrial coming in other areas, and we often at this commission deal with those impacts with residential, adjacent residential neighborhoods, that truck traffic through residential neighborhoods, those other, there's other potential impacts that come with residential, with industrial next to residential. And that is, something to have to do. With that, there are several other review processes that will have to happen on that. It did get brought up that 24-hour in the mixed employment, 24-hour is not entitled by right. So that would take a conditional use permit. So that's that any operation between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. If they wanted to operate, they need to have a conditional use permit. The format of these buildings will require additional major site plan reviews, particularly for grading. So yes, there's always those competing, but it's sort of naturally seen where we're seeing utilities, where we're seeing our growth happen, the appropriateness of that growth, as you said, versus an industrial hub versus that maintenance of a rural character of that area.
And, I appreciate that. And how do you respond to, so in the master plan, and again, I'm looking at it here with the structure plan and the employment areas map with the, essentially the vision that's been communicated to residents, to the city, to our community, that the industrial logistics area, the corridor essentially ends where Virginia Street kind of hits 395 there at that triangle. And in the map, it doesn't really continue past that. How do we communicate that to the community that that's what we're showing in our master plan, but now through this change, we're saying no, because we have an applicant that's willing to develop the property, we're okay with the city, as a city, making that fundamental shift in our vision. How do we respond to that?
Yeah, that is a challenge, right? We've sat down as a community as a whole and put that master plan together. We also know that the master plan is going to change as we grow, and as I think my presentation showed, we've seen the growth that has happened in that area in the last, specifically around our industrial corridors, our industrial hubs have grown significantly, and that land and appropriate places for that to happen are scarce and rare. We have a few of them, but we have a lot of policy that supports either protection or establishment of those hubs, because they are part of a larger portion of our overall economy, our city as a whole, that support of our economics and those residential areas. And so there are a lot of challenges that happen with that, but our master plan grows and changes. It's not a static document in time. The big one that happens with this is that we would anticipate if this proposal went through, we would modify the master plan, not only in that zoning, but that structure plan would have to be modified too. That is currently a foothill, suburban foothill neighborhood that we'd see on that corridor. That would move more into that logistic corridor sort of framework and what is established there. So there's some really big changes being proposed tonight.
I guess last question, and maybe it's not a fair question to you, but the purview of the Planning Commission is fairly limited, right, in terms of our jurisdiction to review master plan amendments. I mean, we're looking at it from a land use perspective and compatibility issues, timing of growth, availability of infrastructure, those considerations. It's challenging, I think, as a planning commission, or this commissioner at least, to be asked such a fundamental question when the purview of the planning commission doesn't include the ability to weigh the economic needs of the community and things that you talked about, like demand for industrial development revenue from sales tax from industrial development. So it's like we're asked to ignore that piece, but that information is being presented to us as a rationale for making a decision. How do you respond to that, relative to our purview versus city councils?
Yeah, that it is challenging but one of the things that we do require now with the master plan, which is what you are reviewing tonight, is a financial analysis when it's over a certain acreage, right? And so that is under your purview in the sense of that positive, that master plan change would allow for that zoning change, right? And there is what is being presented with that is a financial benefit to the city economically through taxes, the other things that you're seeing. That's been reviewed by our financial staff. So that is, in essence, something you are able to review, because we require that now with the master plan of this size to be reviewed. That's also required through the annexation. So that is under your purview tonight, those financial through that master plan. Yeah, when we see that zoning, those zoning, you see them often, and you know what they go to. It's that quality of life, preservation of our some of the open space protection, natural scenic resources, promote the health and general welfare is one of those under those zoning that this could fall under, right? Is if we see this, is that provision of jobs, that provision of those, I guess when we're looking at 200 acres now instead of 10 acres at a time, which is what we saw on the North Virginia corridor. With that zoning and looking at that zoning, you do with those zoning can say, look, it probably makes there could be sense in knowing what's going to happen on 210 acres instead of seeing small annexations coming in or piece by piece that we saw. So there is a larger purview that you get to see tonight with that zoning that I think could help support those zoning findings and those master plan findings that you're seeing before you because of the size and scale and the specifically what is coming in and knowing what the potential of the development is.
And so staff's conclusion is that the fiscal benefits of this, this transition from rural to something that has economic development potential for the city, the availability of infrastructure to support the development essentially justifies the transition of this area. That it's a rural area that's county land within it or adjacent to it, abuts public land, large lot residential already. For goodness sakes, there's a zoo that's out there. So staff's conclusion is that this area is ready to make that transition.
Correct. And not just based on economics, right? We're seeing that growth pattern, that development pattern changing. We're seeing that supportive residential. The character of this area is changing. Not just here, it's changing throughout the North Valleys, right? And we're kind of butting up against a lot of that, the rural character and the growth of the city, right? Those are two things we're seeing out there right now. And what does that mean? And the determination you have, is that appropriate growth for our city to move that way? Or is it appropriate to maintain that rural character? And it's a hard decision, but that's basically the decision before you tonight.
Thank you. I appreciate the responses as always, Brooke.
Thank you.
Commissioners, other questions? Commissioner Johnson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to follow up, Brooke, to one thing I heard you say, and I just want to get clarification. You indicated that in the mixed employment zone, the 24-hour operation requires a conditional use permit. Does that still apply when it's listed as an allowable use in the SPD?
Correct, because of that, they're still subject to Reno Municipal Code. Mixed employment is the zoning. And so if we go to our conditional use permits, we allow 24 in industrial and industrial commercial. But when we get to ME, it is not allowed by right. And so ME would require any operations after 11 o'clock at night to 6 a.m. would require that additional conditional use permit.
I want to hear Garrett's take on that because I don't believe
I don't think that's the intent. Yes, but per the code and what's required, if it's not specifically that 24-hour is allowed in the SPD, and I do not know a concession in there that it is. So I will let Garrett talk just to make sure we're clear on the record on that.
Garrett, can you, because I'm seeing 24-hour operations as the very first bullet item in the allowable uses.
Yeah.
So can you maybe answer that question as well?
Correct. So yeah, I have a little different take than Brooklyn.
And that was my oversight. I would like to say that is an allowable use. So that is within the SPD of one of the things they are changing from the ME zoning. And I apologize for that misunderstanding on that.
So the record, so the record's clear. Commissioner Johnson, just so the record's clear. Yes, on page 9 of the handbook, under permitted uses, we would have a right to 24 hours. And that's certainly standard for these industrial logistics centers because, right, all of us are the product of that. We all get on Amazon or get on some website and want the product and want it now. And so any tenant will want the ability to operate 24 hours to meet market demand. That said, we have built in some protections. For example, on page 14 of the handbook, under environmental conditions, it says buildings planned on pads within 100 feet of existing residential shall limit their hours to only truck deliveries and loading outside of the building. And furthermore, business activities occurring inside the buildings can be permitted within and operate within 24 hours. There's some other screening requirements and where docks should be located on the architectural section. I won't continue unless you want me to, but 24 hours, but there's some protections we built in that are similar to other projects around the area.
And I appreciate that clarification, Garrett. So let me just maybe follow up with the sort of the follow along question to that. It seems like there's a lot of, we've got this in here with the base zoning of the mixed employment. And I understand that, but it's as if most of the changes that we're making from 24-hour operation to building size, there's a lot of development of the structures in here that are much more in keeping with industrial or industrial commercial. That I believe that, the mitigation that you spoke about in the presentation was the offsetting of that with the open space zoning. So I guess I'll ask you first, what's the reason, I guess, for if a lot of what's being put in here as an exception to the ME is to bring it closer to the industrial, why not come in with industrial as the underlying zoning?
So a little background, when we first went and sat down with staff, we went through that discussion. Certainly our goal is to develop a logistical center, but how do we get there? The first proposal was, you're right, industrial. Should we have industrial zoning, which is similar to a lot of the zoning down the corridor? And we looked at it and said, you know what, there would be unlimited square footage for industrial. There'd be unlimited building area for industrial, and a number of other design standards that would be, we thought and staff thought might be too broad for this area. So then we looked at just ME, going straight to ME. Mixed employment, however, had a cap on building sizes, building footprints of 500,000 square feet. I know we're not talking about a project tonight. We're just talking about this handbook.
No, and I appreciate that. I'm trying to get an understanding of, fundamentally, I think we all understand what an industrial zone means because it happens from, Lemon Drive to Stead, or from Golden Valley Drive to Stead. So what I'm hearing is that there's really some desire to not go that large, or are we still thinking that the building potential at 500,000 square feet is in keeping with some of that?
So let me first also say, specific plan wasn't on the books as a tool for some of these other industrial projects. So we thought, let's use this. We're kind of the first project bringing this forward since City Council approved it, to say, you know what, our project doesn't fit squarely in the mixed employment. It doesn't fit squarely into industrial. Let's do a specific plan that has specific design criteria. So on page 9 of the handbook, right, that's where it says we can't go over 2 million square feet total. We can't go over 1.3 million square feet for a particular building. And other design standards, from setbacks to buffering to how we'll deal with the drainage, to corridors, to connectivity. All that stuff, as you know, couldn't normally be conditioned, right? And the 24-hour provisions I mentioned, you can't condition that in straight zoning. So we thought, and to the point we discussed earlier with you, is the sustainability requirements, that also wouldn't be available to us with just strict zoning. The handbook was a great tool to build those voluntary mitigations or concessions in as well. So we tried to pick and pull and work with staff on a plan that fit into the area, met all the findings of the area. And if I may just address kind of Mr. Gower's comments just briefly, we're not talking about economics, right? We're talking about policies. What do the policies that are on the books tonight support this project? And as I mentioned, the master plan policies clearly do. I listed 4 or 5 of them, and they all say logistical centers, continued growth, public facilities and infrastructure available, and redevelopment of corridors, not by property, by assemblage, which is what we're doing. And also we're tier 2.
Hey,
So
Gordon.
Garrett,
Garrett.
I'm gonna stop you on that one too. So I don't want to get into that discussion. There's a whole another thing to unpack from that wasn't really the question that I had.
Okay.
I do want to have one more.
Mr.
question.
Johnson, if I may answer that too, just from a staff perspective, there's 2 ways to kind of skin this. We could have taken IC or I and toned it down to where we are, or take ME and go up, right? And so you can get to the same place with either one. We sort of felt that starting with the lower base and upping that lower base was probably more appropriate than starting with the higher intensity zonings and toning those down or conditioning those down, as Garrett was saying. So that's maybe another way to look at this.
And I appreciate that. And the idea of a special planning district to be able to straddle some of this does make a lot of sense. However, there's still some fundamental questions similar to what Commissioner Gower had raised. The one, I guess, follow-up to his line of questioning, Brooke, was maybe a conversation, looking at this extension, but how much of the actual sort of geography of the area here and the geographical connection between the proposed area that we're looking at tonight and the existing corridor that is being proposed to extend. There's a hill. We know there's a hill because there's a water tower on it. Traveling on Virginia, there is a pretty substantial transition from the valley area where the existing logistics area has been built out to the more rural area that we're looking at here. So, there's been a lot of talk about, from you and from the applicant about the extension of that, existing logistics area, and it makes sense, but was that also factoring in that we're essentially moving into what feels like a different valley on that side of Peavine with the transition from Stead Boulevard to Red Rock?
Yeah, we do start to see that geographic sort of restriction right there before it opens back up. I think that's what you're speaking to. We're seeing some city zoning in there, SF8, SF3, the feasibility of those zonings. They are zoned that. They do have that right currently. Is that the appropriate zoning there? That's hard to say of that extension, but we definitely see, to your point, we're seeing that around that transition, we're seeing this pocket basically of where's being proposed, where we see some of that county residential. Additionally, we see another restriction as we go over, and the Stonegate development also is another one that we know is coming in, which is highly residential. We've restricted a lot of the industrial off of that property that we originally had zoned with that PUD coming in on that. So we are seeing 2 geographical restrictions. There is a small island. What's unique about this is we're seeing that on-ramp right there of Red Rock Road. We know we have an expansion of Red Rock Road coming in. We're anticipating future residential development along that Red Rock as that expands, and potential future industrial other development happening there also. So it is, I understand your constraint there, and looking, is it a logical geographical constraint to move into another development pattern, or is it illogical to extend that current industrial logistic zoning that we're seeing? And that's a challenge. That's a challenge that we worked with staff to make that determination. We came really looking at that logistical onto 395 as being really an area that we would anticipate seeing commercial development strictly off ramps. That 395, the expansion of 395 in the future, and then being logical sort of place for industrial other uses that could quickly get on 395, as opposed to some of those that we're seeing that are moving through residential areas or more dense residential areas.
Yeah, I understand. So
Yeah.
that, I think that answers my question. I don't think I have any other specific questions just yet. I'll turn it back to you, Mr. or Commissioner, Madam Chair.
Gotcha.
I may have a couple more afterwards. Thank you.
Okay, I have a quick question for, I'm going to ask Jason this, just because we had some public comment, some of the concerns. If you could just maybe talk a little bit about some of the concerns that we heard related to a project and what we're asked to do tonight as the Planning Commission, as far as master plan amendment and zoning. Some of the concerns I think that we heard are maybe more specific to a project, and whether those would be addressed later down the road, maybe some during some of the things that Brooke mentioned upcoming.
Absolutely. Jason Garcia-LeBou, Planning Manager with the City of Reno. Good evening, everybody. Just to kind of expand on that, and as Brooke mentioned, and as the chair just mentioned, in this, what's before you this evening is very specific in scope to, got a little froggy throat there, pardon me. But the request before you tonight is in regards to a recommendation to the council for the master plan and the zoning. And so that's where the discussion is really focused on. As Brooke mentioned in his presentation, there will be kind of future plans that come before the commission in regards to grading or other different items. And that's more specific to the actual physical development. This is more on the discussion and conversation with the master plan and the zoning. So that's hopefully just kind of reiterating what's been discussed this evening.
So Jason, some of the questions that were asked tonight in public comment will probably most likely be addressed in future public hearings. Is that inaccurate? Okay. I just don't want folks to think that they're making comments and they're not getting answers. It's just not really part of the scope of what this meeting is tonight. So commissioners, do we have some other questions? Commissioner Velto, did you raise your hand or did you just put your hands up?
Oh, my question was answered. I'm just.
Oh, okay. You're just fidgeting.
Yeah.
Commissioners, other questions? I don't see any other hands. We can move into discussion. I know Commissioner Villanueva had some comments. Oh, Commissioner Munoz, did you have a question?
No, Madam Chair, I was ready for discussion.
Oh, okay. Why don't you lead us off?
Okay. The location of this for what they're proposing makes sense because of the on-ramp right there. But looking at at staff's recommendations and what they're proposing, that's the only thing that makes sense for me. I'm not seeing anything else that makes sense there because it is a rural area. They made the applicant made a point that it is an extension of North Virginia and the building that is going on further south, but that's not the case. This is its own little island. It's its own little area that is surrounded by homes and federal land. So I don't know. I want to know if you guys can help me get there, because right now I'm struggling with this, and this doesn't fit the area for me. I'm nowhere near there. So I'm just wondering if anybody else can chime in there and see what they think.
Commissioners? Yeah, it's Commissioner Velto. I guess I hear what you're saying, Commissioner Munoz, but I guess I just kind of disagree with that. I was at the zoo, actually, that's right down the road from this the other day. And I actually am going back in a couple weeks, so I spend more time here than I thought I would. But I see this, I don't understand this idea that there's a cutoff when we're going up Virginia. I've driven to this location both from the 395 and from Virginia. And it makes sense that this would be a continuation of Virginia, because the area, as I'm seeing it, between where there's industrial development and where this is proposed at a lesser, kind of a lesser use, it is only 2,000 feet. And I may be off on that number, but when I'm looking at it, it seems to make sense. And having driven to it both ways, in my mind, I see it as being compatible. One of the things that was brought up a little earlier by Commissioner Gower and his questioning was how we have to make the choice of what is this area supposed to be based on. And there was a statement made that maybe we shouldn't consider some of the economic benefits of what the master plan is driving at. Looking through the different portions of the master plan, I think we can take into account those financial benefits, and that kind of helps us understand how this should be zoned. Section 1.2 says we should promote a stable economic base and business retention. Section 2.1 talks about annexation, which, while that's not our role in this process, it's contemplated. So I feel like it's important to look at what the purpose of that is. And one of those purposes is to enhance the mixture of uses and developments, which I think is consistent with this. I see the area surrounding this proposal as having housing means that this is they're far enough away to make it so it's not incompatible, but this is really the next step, I think, in how our city is going to grow. We have to grow outward if we're going to grow anywhere, because there's been, frankly, just a lot of pushback on a lot of the infill projects. So I'm kind of stuck wondering where that's supposed to go. But as far as the compatibility issue, maybe I'm just seeing it differently, but driving in this area, it seems like it's compatible because of what's to the south on Virginia.
Thank you, Commissioner Velto.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner,
Oh, go ahead, Commissioner Munoz. Go ahead. You can retort.
Hey, thank you. Sorry, Commissioner Munoz. I agree with you up until a point, but if I'm looking at Google Maps here, and I'm in the area quite a bit. I live up here, and I do hunt the hillside here, going up Peavine. So once you go past Copart and you go past the storage unit there, you have to go over a hill, and that hill's a natural barrier that separates. So when you come into the proposed area, it's like its own little island. It's its own little valley set in there. And so that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing this own little residential mini community within the community, which is probably, in my mind, why it hasn't been annexed yet. It's literally its own little pocket community. And so I do see a separation there. And then if you keep going to the east, you hit the hillside going over into Cold Springs, which is another barrier. And so it is its own little island kind of stuck right there. So I totally understand what you're saying. If you were to look at it as just driving down the freeway and seeing a continuation from North Virginia, then it does make sense. But knowing there's those natural barriers that make its own little island, that's kind of what I'm seeing and how this is its own little community. So that's more where I'm getting stuck in how I don't see this really fitting in the area. So thank you.
thank you. Commissioner Draculich, did you have a comment?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Munoz and Commissioner Velto, thank you. I guess I'm a little bit more in the realm of Commissioner Velto, only because when I see this as large lot residential, I don't see this as being an advantage for the growth of the community as a 10 to 15 year outlook. So what is the right use for this here? Is it, single family zoning? Is it more houses? Is it higher density? There's also does seem to be a need for more retail and employment right off the highway there. So I get that. Maybe it's not fully needed there, but also Brooke's opinion on Stonegate, not too far from there. We're going to have a heavy amount of single family coming up there too. So I am a little bit torn. Can't say I'm leaning one way or another at the moment, but I do kind of go towards Commissioner Velto more on a 10 to 15 year outlook on the area. But also, Commissioner Munoz, your opinion is valid, and I understand that community is quite a little pocket and unique to the area. So those are my thoughts.
Commissioners, other comments, discussion? Commissioner Villanueva?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My concerns are, we have this master plan, we have the development code, which a lot of time has been spent into putting these together. And the intent is there for how we we're looking ahead, how we plan to develop. And, we start approving projects with these plans in mind. And then we get these applications that come in that in my opinion, this type of application doesn't really fit into this, within the character of the community. It's not really compatible. And then we start saying things like, oh, well, the master plan, it's changeable. We can modify that. And that's fine. And I agree to an extent. I'm not saying that I wouldn't approve down the road some type of change to the master plan or an amendment, a text amendment. But to this extreme, this is on the border of industrial and what I believe is a very residential space. And, maybe something more in the middle, like a mixed use that wouldn't allow 24-hour, large semis traveling through otherwise residential neighborhoods. So, that's fine. We can, I think it is appropriate sometimes to make changes to a master plan, but with the frequency that we do it, it makes me think, what's the point? If we just get these applicants that come in here and just feel that, they can just throw in whatever they feel is appropriate. Not to say that this, the applicant made a lot of good points. It is right next to the freeway, like Commissioner Muniz mentioned, but I think my sentiments kind of reflect a little bit about what Commissioner Gower was saying earlier. We have a fundamental question here on land use and the character of the space and its use, and whether the proposed changes are compatible with the surrounding areas and the current development, and what we anticipate to be future development with the new Stonegate development. So that's kind of my comments and thoughts on this.
Thank you. Commissioner Johnson?
I was wondering whether it was me or Commissioner Gower you're going for next.
You've been awfully quiet. I'm picking on you.
Is that a statement on how I normally am? Probably. Interesting question that's before us, and I appreciate Commissioner Gower's sort of overview, because I think he kind of captured the questions that were sort of in the back of my mind the whole time we were looking at this. And I guess first blush, what I do appreciate from what we're seeing here is the way that staff and the applicant have been sort of taking advantage of the way that we've put this special planning district together to attempt to carve out something that is maybe more sensitive to the site than a straight zoning would be. This is certainly not something that would be, in my mind, a full industrial area. The intensification from a large lot residential to industrial is just a leap too far in my mind. So I think what is before us is sort of a step back from that. And I think the applicant and staff mentioned that, which I think is the appropriate sort of transitional approach. Because certainly when you look at that area, we have residential just on the other side of the freeway. We have an exit on the freeway, which has immediate residential adjacency, as well as the start of some, commercial work. I think there's a new building that was built just in the last year or so that will lease out for some space. So I think there's a recognition there of that. But I think where I'm coming back to, and that was sort of the question that, I asked the question on, was really how close are we skewing to industrial here versus something that's more transitional? I mean, I think the mixed employment zone kind of dials it back a little bit. It reduces the scale that's allowable for the buildings. I think it encourages a little bit more of a mix. And I think to the point that I made, both from a geographical standpoint and Commissioner Munoz echoed, we're really transitioning out of that corridor here, both geographically, distance-wise. We're in an area that starts to feel different, and it's ultimately transitioning up to Cold Springs and Stonegate, which is, predominantly residential. So that fundamental question of what does this want to be? What is the transition from here? Is it multifamily? Is it mixed use? Is it even a more dense single family, similar to what's happening on the other side of the freeway? Which would be, in my mind, maybe not as big of a leap from the large lot residential to the mixed employment. So I'm struggling because I think, there is a, desire to create a project here that takes advantage of some of the things that the master plan had identified. But I think just as easy as it is to say how the master plan supports this project, we could spend about 5 minutes going through the master plan and demonstrate how this area could be used as a denser housing area and how it demonstrates additional housing needs, transition to the BLM area adjacent to that, sort of working with the other adjacencies. So I'm kind of talking to myself around in a circle, but from a discussional standpoint, the fundamental questions that Commissioner Gower raised really kind of crystallized for me what we're looking at here. And I'm just kind of looking at what is the best way to approach this. And I appreciate the discussion that everybody's having. And I think I'll stop there and turn it over to Commissioner Gower.
Commissioner Gower.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I think Commissioner Johnson put it on the head or nailed it on the head of going kind of around in circles. I'm doing that in my mind here with all of the considerations and questions with this. It's a fundamental question, like I was asking Brooke, is, what should this area look like? And the master plan currently says one thing, and we're being asked whether it's appropriate for it to say something else. So for me, the pros for it to say something else are include some of the considerations in the master plan that Commissioner Velto pointed out, and I agree that those are within our purview to consider. Also for consideration are the availability of infrastructure and services, and the proximity of this project, this location to an off-ramp. Those are all kind of in that supports this and it makes sense. On the flip side, like Commissioner Johnson mentioned, there's a whole set of other policies in the master plan that would support leaving it as large lot residential. I mean, like I had pointed out earlier, it abuts public lands. It's in a fairly distinct area from the industrial corridor, because there is that transition, and frankly the structure plan and the master plan it reflects that, it identifies it in that map. So I mean, that's a pretty big change, and it kind of falls within that con column. So for me, it's do those pros outweigh the cons that I'm okay to say yes, this change is appropriate. And it's it's like any master plan amendment. Sometimes the scale is, really tips one way versus the other, and it's a lot more obvious. In this case, it's, pretty even for me. Thanks.
Okay, commissioners, we have two proposed motions. Michelle, can you put those back up if possible?
Yes, just one moment.
And I believe the first one for the master plan, we would need 5 votes for approval, recommendation.
This is Commissioner Velto. Before making the motion, I just want to say to Commissioner Gower, I'm a huge fan of very clear tests, and I like the way you frame this as a balancing test. I think it's really helpful for understanding it, and I appreciate your perspective on it. With that said, I do think I can make the findings, and because of that, in the matter of LDC 22-00018, based upon compliance with the applicable findings, I move to adopt the amendment to the master plan by resolution. and recommend that City Council adopt the master plan amendment subject to approval of the associated annexation and conformance review by the Truckee Meadows Regional Planning Commission.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Velto. Do we have a second?
Commissioner Draculich, I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. And Michelle, can you help us with the vote, please?
Yes. Taylor,
Yes.
Draculich,
Yes.
Gower,
No.
Johnson,
No.
Munoz,
Yes.
Belto,
Yes.
Villanueva.
No.
Okay, so the vote is 4-3, so it's a technical denial.
Okay. Commissioner, I'm sorry, Commissioner Munoz, you were, you voted yes?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Do we move on to the next one, or does it?
So that motion fails. You
matter?
need 5 votes.
Okay. Yeah, that the first motion failed.
Right.
Does that make the second motion moot, or would you like?
Exactly, that's what I'm asking.
No, but we're going to have some clarification on the second motion, so you can go ahead and we'll have a second motion on that. So why don't you go ahead and clarify?
Okay, so we go ahead and we'll need a motion for the second.
This is Jasmine Mehta for the record. I just want to make sure that the second motion clarifies that the base zoning would be ME with the SPD zone overlay on top of that.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Velto, in the matter of LDC 22-00018, based upon compliance with the applicable findings, I recommend that City Council adopt my apologies. So this, the clarifying is that the mixed.
The zoning map amendment to ME with the SPD overlay.
Perfect. The zoning map amendment to ME with SPD overlay and subject to approval of the associated annexation.
And you can make all the findings?
And I can make all the findings. Thank you very much.
Okay, we have a motion.
Commissioner Draculich, I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Michelle, can you do the same thing, please, with roll call?
Taylor,
Yes?
Draculich,
Yes.
Gower,
No.
Johnson,
No.
Munoz,
Yes.
Belto,
Yes.
Villanueva.
No.
So the vote is 4-3, and that passes.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. That was good discussion. We will move on to item number 7, Truckee Meadows Regional Planning Liaison Report. Commissioner Johnson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We had a meeting last week, and because it was last week, I may have already forgotten most of the things that we talked about. And I don't believe I'm going to get much help from the rest of my commission members since we were a little short that night. I apologize. I literally do not remember what was on the agenda. So that is really unfortunate as the chair of that commission. So
We can direct everybody to the website, right? We can, if everybody.
Yes, there was a couple of conformance reviews. It went by so quickly. There was nothing that was contentious. I think the one from the city of Reno that was on there was the Plum Lane master plan amendment that we saw for the old AT&T building that had been we had seen that as a master plan amendment a few months ago. That was on the regional level, and that one was approved. The other items were in Washoe County. So it's my failed report for the evening.
I think it was very good. Thank you. Jason, birthday, 40 birthday, agenda item number 8, staff announcements.
Yes, thank you. We'll try this again. My voice seems to be doing a little better there. So, City Council on January 26th, we had a couple items. Previously, your commission had reviewed the Reno Lear industrial zoning recommendation, and so that was approved by the council. Also, the Rancho 4 appeal, that was just kind of to refresh the memories here, a tentative map for 142 lots. It was a townhome subdivision with the associated conditional use permit for increased density hillside development and some kind of other site developments based on the drainage way. The council amended or basically updated the approval of the planning commission on that, adding some conditions, basically modifying the resolution to include additional conditions regarding tree protection and trail connectivity and an updated site plan. As far as kind of development services department updates, we continue to kind of look at the planning commission and educational opportunities, and I'm really looking forward to bringing it towards the commission. We've kind of connected with the American Planning Association, some of the digital training opportunities. There are 5-minute to 30-minute seminars, and we're looking to kind of roll those into some of the future meetings. So I think the commission will find that helpful, as well as kind of our public and our staff too. So we're kind of looking at that. And then for our February 16th meeting, it looks like we're going to have a few items. We tentatively have about 6 items at this point. We'll see some more daybreak items, as well as the Copper Mesa development, and we will also have a educational presentation on the carbon footprint topic that I kind of mentioned at the last meeting. So we're looking forward to bringing that to your commission. But if there's any other items, feel free to reach out or let me know. So thank you, Commission.
Madam Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Villanueva.
No, it's Michelle.
Oh, sorry, Michelle.
It's okay. On the February 16th meeting, we will have a 5:30 start time, 6 o'clock public hearings, just so you know.
Okay. Sorry, I was looking at Commissioner Villanueva when you started talking. Okay, thank you, Jason. We hope you have a good birthday. Moving on to item number 9, Commissioner's suggestions for future agenda items. I just want to take this time to say this was mentioned in our regional meeting. RTC lost their public or their government affairs manager, Michael Moreno. And, you know, I think our thoughts and our prayers are with everybody over at RTC and Michael's family and friends. And he was a tremendous asset to the community, to RTC, and a great partner for the city of Reno. So I appreciate your thoughts for that. Other suggestions or comments, commissioners? Okay, we'll move on to public comment. Michelle, do we have any public comment?
No, I do not have any public comment for this item.
Okay, we'll close public comment and move on to item number 11, adjournment. Anyone?
Commissioner Nunes, I move to adjourn.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, good night, everybody. Thank you for all your input.